Hello folks, Richard Sims here for Action Angling and SkippersTackleBox.com. Here to tell you about the basics carp fishing. If you want to get into carp fishing, well, number one, you want to find your spot. And it's important to find carp before you even start fishing. Well, I didn't do that today, we just picked a random spot that was out of the wind. But normally you want to look for some bubble activity, some surfacing fish, anything of that sort. Fish eating flies, fish jumping, fish rolling. And carp are pretty obvious about where they are. Even if they're in a set of lily pads, you'll see the lily pads move as they shoot through them. But anyways, we just picked a random spot today, and it's not really a good carp spot, so we probably won't see any fish on video. But I'm just here to tell you about the equipment that we use for out carp fishing. And number one piece of equipment you need before you go carp fishing is a good landing net. This one actually isn't a good one. It's a bad example because it's the old school style, what do you call it, fabric net, or whatever you want to call it, but it's a big hoop net with a big strong handle. It's made for muskie. But if you're going to use a net like this, because not everyone can afford it, like normally carp fishermen want to use a micro mesh net or a rubberized net, and it's more for landing fish than it is for hoisting them out of the water. But if you're going to use a net like this, and I have been for a couple of seasons now, you just, the main thing is to wet the net. Get it all saturated, nice and wet as you're landing a fish. Before you put the fish into the net, make sure it's all nice and wet so it won't damage the fish. Because the point of carp fishing is normally to catch a release. And you want to do that as safely as possible, like you would with any other fish. Like pike or muskie or anything else you use a big net like this for. So I mean, if I use this for trout or steelhead or muskie, I wet the net just the same. And it's really important. But the large, we got gunshots in the background. The large mesh in the net does tend to take scales off of the carp, which, you know, not a humongous big deal. They have humongous scales and quite a bit of armor on them, so they can take a lot, but you still don't want to damage the fish for no reason. So I am going to invest in a micro mesh net real soon. My friend is actually going to sell me one. So for now, this will work. Like I said, make sure it's really wet before you put a fish in there. The next thing you want is a landing mat. I posted a video by a man named Brian Wingard. He's a very good, experienced carp fisherman, and I posted that in the Action Angling page about landing mats and why they're important, so I won't touch up too much on that. But it's basically just a padded mat, and you can use a yoga mat, like he says in his video. You can use a yoga mat or a cushion off of your couch or whatever, but you're better off to use a landing mat than cushions off the couch. Also, before you ever cast, you get this thing wet, because it's another thing, like the slime on the fish is their protective coating that keeps them disease free and infection free. Throwing it on a dry mat is just as good as throwing it on gravel or on the ground, because it's going to take slime off of the fish no matter what landing mat you're using. So you're going to want to do this. Normally I'd have a little bucket of water to pour on it, but I don't have one today. So I'm just going to, this one has a nice long strap on it. So I'm just going to wrap that around my hand so I don't lose it, and toss it in the water. Now it's a little bit saturated, kind of waterproof material, so water will bead up on there. So normally you'd want a bucket to keep on pouring water on this as the day goes on. You never know when a carp's going to bite. You don't want to leave it dry too long, but for now, just to show you, now it's a little bit saturated. You could leave it in there longer if you wanted, so it's nice and really saturated, but it's fall right now, so hopefully the sun won't dry it up too fast. And now we're ready to start setting up our equipment. You generally don't want to leave your rod just sitting on the ground. I mean, it's not good for your reel anyway to get mud and gravel in there and sand or whatever's on the ground. You don't want bugs crawling all over it when you pick it up with a big spider on your hand or something. So you're going to want to either take branches off of a tree. That's what we did for years. And you get a Y-shaped branch and you just jam it in the ground, or a couple of them, and that works really well. But eventually you're going to want to invest in at least some of these bank sticks. And these are really handy. You see I duct taped a little piece of a margarine container lid in this one. That's so it can hold my rod guide up and allow the line to run through it freely. And you would just set these apart. I'm not going to use these today, but just to show you, you'd set them apart like that. Get them all nice and stable, and you can rest your rod in there and have it leaning over the water. So that's the number one thing. I'll show you the pond in a minute, but I'm going to talk to you right now about what kind of rods we're going to use. And I did it for years with a 7-foot medium action spinning rod at 8-pound test, and I'll tell you, I lost a lot of fish. You break them off, and that's not something you want to do very often. You don't want to leave hooks in fish's faces or in their guts or whatever, So number one, definitely use braided line, like 30-pound at least. I use 50 on my larger rods. Actually, one here is rigged with 30. But either way, braided line is not going to bust off fish. You're more likely to straighten a hook if you have a proper knot in there than you are to bust off a fish. And just like any other fishing, you don't want to leave hooks in the fish's faces. Period. This one is an actual carp rod. This is a Daiwa Mad Dragon carp rod. And you'll notice that the carp guys uniformly use 12-foot fishing rods. But you might think, what do you need a 12-foot rod for? And the answer is for playing the fish. Carp have humongous tails, and they shoot a lot of power out of those tails, and they'll give you big long runs, and they'll pretty much go wherever they want to go. Even with 50-pound braid and a big rod like this, they still have most of the control during the fight. So a 12-foot rod is really going to help you with your power and your landing of those fish. This is a really stiff rod. It's actually light in the carp grades. It's 2 3/4 pound test curve, and usually these guys are using 3 to 3 1/4 pound. But this one works just fine for me. And notice they got the big long handle on the back, and the reason for that is so you can get yourself braced like this when you're fighting a fish. Because I mean, it's tiresome. Getting a big carp on 20 pounds up, it is a tiresome battle, and it lasts a long time. You want to have that rod buried in like this, and there's going to be a lot of long runs where you aren't touching the handle of the reel. You can get up there like this, get a good grip on that rod, and make sure you play out the fish properly. And when fish are running 75 yards, they can run clear across this pond. You're going to want the long rod, yet again, to play them out from that far away and not lose so many fish. Because that's a long ways out for your line to be. Big giant reel. This is a 6,000 size reel with a big long spool, because yet again there's going to be big long runs. It's kind of like salmon fishing, if you've ever done that before. You want a big spool because they're going to run a long ways. Get this untangled here. Before I show you my rig, I should also mention that the reel has a bait feeder option, and that revolutionized carp fishing. It really did, because a lot of the fish will take the bait and just run. In fact, with the rigs I'm going to show you, the fish have no choice, but they hook themselves and run. So you just flick this switch here, and it's almost free spool. It's got a little bit of tension, but that'll allow the fish to take your bait pretty well as long as he wants. Seems to be messing up. There we go. And then you can just reel it up, and your bait feeder is engaged again, and you have a regular fighting drag.